Hi there, welcome to my farm training. Today we'll start the very last module of our training on carbon market apply to agriculture. I really hope you enjoy this last chapter. I'm going to be sharing with you some information about the real case projects, some of the benefits for smallholder farmers, and a few things that I think will be very important for you on your career. Let's go. So first start with the objectives of the module. So I have a bit more objectives of this module. It will be around 60 minutes, 1 hour of a training today. And that's why I have many objectives. And I'll start with the first one is present real case studies applying carbon market mechanisms to agricultural systems. You're going to be noticing that I have focused on this presentation on cases from different countries in Europe. So that will facilitate your understanding and even help you even get in contact with those project developers in the near future to learn more and maybe be part of some of those initiatives, okay? The second objective is highlight economic and environmental advantages for farmers participating on the voluntary carbon market. The third objective is identify challenges in limiting smallholders' participation on carbon markets. I have already mentioned some of the struggles or the bottlenecks and challenges, and here I'm going to dive deeper in some of those as well. And always aiming to share with you some of the things that I, as a professional, have seen in the field while working, and based as well on the consultations and some of the work I've done in the past. Okay, back here to presentation. The fourth bullet point is a proposed strategies to ensure transparency, fair revenue sharing, and farmer empowerment. You're going to see that this pillar is very important because the idea here is share with you how and show you the way on how farmers can actually benefit from this market. Not just the brands that buy the credits, but the farmer himself or herself can benefit, okay? The fifth objective is explore scalable multi-country models for developing regional agriculture carbon markets. Perfect. It's a multi-country strategy. I'll be talking about some of those multi-country. And the last one is encourage stakeholder engagement in climate smart, low carbon agriculture transitions. This goes directly to you. So try to inspire you to get your hands on the carbon and become maybe a consultant, a practitioner, or a carbon developer, acting exactly on this potential and strong market that has so much potential in the near future. Okay, let's go. So here I bring to you an Italian case, an Italian real case of voluntary carbon market apply. The name is the Alberami, the VCM, the voluntary carbon markets. The case number 1 is the real case, a real project. If you take a quick look to the bottom of the page on the left-hand side, you see the link. So by having this presentation, just click on the link, you'll be able to access directly the page. And always remember, at the very last page of this presentation, you can access all of the references and the citations, and on the written material as well, you can access that. So this initiative itself talks about the Alberami, the voluntary carbon market, which comprises a supporting of farmers entering the voluntary carbon market. It facilitates for smallholders to understand how to step into the market and make it real. Just to date for you, they have more than 200 farmers already engaged on the project in different parts of Italy, okay? And it's very interesting the way they're doing. They focus mainly on regenerative agriculture practices, designing and implementing those practices within each of the farms. So at the end of the day, they can propose and promote benefits to the farmers by improving production and creating carbon credits, okay? Which will result in premium carbon certificates as income. This is the main idea of the project of Alberami. And like I said before, this carbon project focuses on improving yields and quality through sustainable practices. It's not just a project to generate carbon revenue. is actually to improve the production itself. Because if you see and if you take a look, if you read, if you go to the field and check, you will see that a successful carbon project is indeed, in fact, a successful sustainable agriculture project. You cannot dissociate good agriculture practices with the carbon revenues and vice versa, okay? Alberami, they do like what they call the tech platform for greenhouse gas emissions quantification and monetization. They have their own platform of blockchain where they input the information, which makes easier for them to deal with information of each of the farms. And once you decide, example, if you decide to be a practitioner working as a carbon developer, you will notice that you'll be managing a lot of information. Just imagine yourself working on a farm with 50 hectares, okay? You'll be implementing practices within each of those 50 hectares. You need information of the last 3 to 5 years before the baseline of the project. You do remember what baseline means. So the business as usual. You need to put for each of the hectares or each of the areas of the farm, what happened 3 years ago, 5 years ago, what are you planning to do? Example, how many kilos of composting I'll be using per hectare, what is the composition of this composting, how I'll be applying, when I'll be applying. So all of this data must go to a platform. And in this case, Alberami uses this technological platform to gather all the information and avoid losing information, which is something that you don't really want when working on a project, on a big project, or maybe even a medium-sized project. You cannot lose any information because this information will serve the verification body that will be double-checking the information, okay? So how Alberami does the following up of the pre-qualification of farmers to the platform, how the program works. So they have 8 different steps they do. So the farmer can actually get into the platform, participating on a project. And what they do, the farm information submission, a farmer, he or she will submitting the information, accessing the platform of Alberami. So they get to the website, they make the membership, and once they have the membership, they download the application or they go to the desktop version and they just put all the information there, okay? Once they accomplish the step number 1, they jump to the step number 2, which is a definition of new agricultural practices. Remember, on the first appraisal of the phase number 1, where the farmer inserts the information, it helps making the initial appraisal, telling what they do as the baseline or as the business as usual today, and what they have done for the last 3 to 5 years, okay? Depending on the methodology they choose. But once they fill all the boxes talking about and explaining what they do, they have a baseline very well traced. Based on that, the platform and the technicians of Alberami will be able to identify what's missing, or they will be identify which pathways or what is the main and the best pathway for this farm to be following to improve the regenerative agriculture practices that will actually enhance productivity and create the scenario for carbon crediting production, okay? And that's why the second phase is the definition of a new agriculture practice. So you understood from the first phase what you have and what you don't have, and then you can define the agriculture practice. Example, they do tillage systems on the soil every third year. With the carbon project, he or she won't be able to keep tilling, keep plowing the soil. So the definition of a new agricultural practices will be no tillage system, okay? So that will be no tillage system. Or they use 150 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare for producing the pasture. So let's find a way of using less nitrogen fertilizers for that. And then they can draft the new agricultural practice. So instead of using this product, using that product, or maybe produce your own compost and start changing, or maybe combining legumes with the grasses to provide to the soil more natural nitrogen, etc. So all of these things that I'm telling you, they will be part of the second phase. Remember, first phase, you do the appraisal, the diagnostics, you understand what you have, what you don't have, and then you define what you need. Always connected with what I have said to you during the second and first class, the third class, additionality. Must be an agricultural practice additional that adds carbon and improves the sustainability of the system, okay? The third step, submission of additional documentation. During this step 1 and 2, the Alberami will be able to see what the farmer has and what is missing from the farm. And that's why the third step is submitting the additional documentation, okay? And then the Alberami will be proceeding to the data analysis and initial assessment to see how the farm is doing, what must be done, how the monitoring will be taking place, and etc. Okay? Once that's done, they sign the membership agreement stating, look, you farmer will be working with Alberami. Let's sign this agreement, this membership agreement, meaning that you must be working with us. You cannot be having ties with other carbon developer because it can cause a bigger problem. Because remember the double counting? If you use this for double count, you can create a credit here under this methodology, creating credits in the same area for the other methodology. You're having more credits, but it will be double counting. So to avoid that, you sign a membership, okay? The sixth step is implementation of on-farm, implementation of the practices. You have defined on step number 2, you have defined the agricultural practices. On step number 6, you actually start implementation of the practices, okay? And then you go to step number 7, where you measure the carbon sequestration. This can happen at the beginning when you collect it at the start of the project, and then on the 3rd or 5th year, you collect again to understand what's happening, on the soil. And then you go to the very last step under the procedure that Alberamis adopt, issuance and sale of carbon credits. This is a very long step because once you implement the practices on step 6, that can take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, can take up to 5 years. Then you have the measurement at the end of this first cycle, contrasting the second measurement with the ex-ante measurement. You have collect soil before and after. Once you have that, you have the verification body going to the farm and doing what I have explained to you, the verification and the validation, and then you have the issuance of the credits to the farmer, and then the very last one is the carbon credits, the creation of carbon credits, the issuance of carbon credits, and the consequent allowing you to sell the credits, put this credit on market and make. This is a very, very simple way of explaining the 8 steps. On the written material, you can go deep in each of those. They are very well explained, but this is the main idea for you to understand how they do. But you must consider that the most part of the verifications and methodologies, they follow this. They do the first appraisal, they define the agricultural practices, they submit documents, they do the analysis, they sign some documents like the step number 5, they implement the practices, they measure by monitoring and measuring, and then they issue the client, they issue the credits. So it can go to the market, the farmer can go to the market, or maybe the carbon developer go to the market, depending on the contract, and create some money out, financial assets out of the carbon credit. Okay? Other thing, still regarding the Alberami VCM, verified and measurable carbon dioxide reductions. So they adopt a methodology that verifies and measures. The participation does not affect United Nations support schemes. Example, CAP, the Common Agriculture Policies. The Common Agriculture Policies pays farmers for green credits and etc. Does not have any problem for the farmer to be participating in EU support schemes and participating on a voluntary carbon market. They're not competing, okay? Other thing, the costs, a percentage of the credit sales plus an annual fee goes to Alberami, okay? What does that mean? Remember that Alberami is a carbon developer here. They must allocate technicians to go to the farm. They must allocate technicians to collect the soil, send the soil analysis to the laboratory, make the analysis and come up with the results. Alberami will be helping the farmer on the drafting the monitoring and help the farmer monitoring the thing. So to cover those costs, they ask for a percentage of the credit that will be sold at the end of the year, plus an annual fee for management. Okay. At the buyers, they guarantee the minimum of 6 tons of carbon dioxide. As I mentioned during the second slide, they use a blockchain for full traceability. Remember, the blockchain system guarantee that you can make the step-by-step of the system. Remember, you have the step-by-step guarantee that you don't lose information on the track, and you keep it crypto. You keep it protected by someone who might invade the system and steal the data, or you might lose the data, okay, like a hackers. And the very last one, certificates include serial number, GPS, parcel, and tons retired. What does that mean? Include a serial number. Remember, to avoid double count, my credits must have an identity. We call this identity serial number. It must be geolocated, meaning my farm is that, the credit is there by geopositioning system, okay? By parcel, by each of the paddocks, each of the areas. And the tons, they are retired. Once Alberami sells this credit on the market, it becomes retired to avoid double counting on the NDCs. Remember, each of the nations, they have to, at the end of the year, they have to say, look, I have accomplished, I have removed, or I have reduced this amount of credits. Where these credits come from projects like the Alberami. And that's why they use the retirement of credits to avoid double counting in 1 year to use the same credit for the other year. Okay. Still on Alberami, they adopt organic principles such as reduced tillage and cover crops, or intercropping with the biodiversity promotion. Example, the combination of grasses with the legumes, okay, to bring more diversity to the soil and less reliance on chemical nitrogen fertilizers. They adopt buffer zones, mulching, natural strengthener. Example, mulching is the fact that you cover the soil before you're planting. Natural strengtheners can be just a line of trees that will be protecting, such as buffer zones. Over those years that have been working, Alberami has achieved a 15% reduction in synthetic fertilizers, which is a very high and very good numbers, and up to 50% reduction on synthetic pesticides. It's a huge number. This is so good for the environment, so good for us, for you as a population, for us as a population, and for the environment at all, okay? What they do more regarding regenerative agriculture, they push the system on crop rotation, orchard planting, and conversion to pastures, okay? And the program provides technical support and ensures verifiable results. Remember, on the previous slide, I have mentioned that Alberami charges a fee per year, exactly to cover the very last bullet point you can see. The program provides technical support. So with these fees, the annual fees and the charge, they can pay the technicians to go to the field and support the farmer on achieving the results. Okay? So the second case is called a GECO 2.2 project. It's a nice project. It's a multi-country project, as you can see from Italy and Croatia. Down on the bottom of the page, you can see the internet link. You just click on that and you go direct to the page. You can explore the page and learn more. But the highlights of this project is that the GECO version 2.2, which is the evolution of the 2.0, 2.1, aims to develop a regional voluntary carbon market in agriculture. Goes beyond a state, goes beyond a country. It's a regional level, territorial level. It's funded by Interreg, Italy and Croatia program, 2 nations, okay? And focus on climate mitigation, adaptation, and sustainable agriculture practices. Just for you to have an idea about territory spread of this project. It's, like I said, between Italy and Croatia is surrounding the Adriatic Ocean. And like I said, the project objective, it's promoting climate change awareness. These regions are experiencing a suffering from the climate change, like the changing of raining patterns and temperature patterns, with, you know, becomes a very strong barrier for them to produce what they're producing on the region. That's why they came up with this project to try to soothe the pain of the farmers and try to mitigate the problem, okay? Still regarding the project objectives, GECO 2.2 encourage climate adaptation and mitigation in agriculture, like I said, by increasing the carbon stocks in the soil and the biomass of carbon on soil, understanding the soils with a higher content of carbon biomass, soil organic carbon. They tend to retain more water. They tend to cope better with volatility or variations on temperature, and so on the carbon exchange, on the viability of minerals and nutrients to plants. They do understand the carbon is something important for them. And it enhances resilience to climate impacts such as floods and droughts. You see that this project, in comparison to the first project, has more climatic attachments, because in this region they have been suffering more with the climate changing conditions, okay? The main activities of this GECO 2.2 is develop a voluntary agriculture carbon, the VCM, that's what I'm talking about. And how they do that? They do by awareness campaign and stakeholder capacity building, helping farmers within each of the farmers. They have these field days, going to the farmers and helping them implementing the practices and watching the practices and monitoring to understand the results so they can spread these practices to the other areas, okay? That's why they call awareness campaign and stakeholder capacity building. Capacity building is something very present in any successful project, and this wouldn't be different here. They do the testing of sustainable farming practices, meaning that the GECO 2.2, they don't come with the package, like I have this package, this what you're gonna be following up and 100% have successful. No, they don't do that. They do testing of sustainable farming practices, because they understand the territory is not a small territory. If you quickly take a look, you see that it's between Italy from south to north and Croatia the same. So the climatic zone changes and the soil changes, the water regimen changes. That's why they test sustainable farms to come up with a very tailored result. When we say tailored, it means a demand-driven results as a result that has been drafted for that situation in particular. What they do more as a main activity, GECO 2.2, they've been creating tools for carbon assessment and certification. Like back in again, they understand the local knowledge is always the best knowledge, and that's why they are creating tools for that situation for carbon assessment and certification, okay? Timeline and milestone for the GECO 2.2. The project started on the 1st of February of 2024. They expect to have a 30 months duration of this first phase, okay? The kickoff meeting was in mid-2024, so last year. And the implementation phases, at these phases goes Italy and Croatia, okay? This is the picture, is a print screen of the main page of the project, which you can access through the link that I have sent you, that I have shared on the first slide of this GECO 2.2. So it's a very interesting project, okay? It's still some of the regions. You can have a look on where this project is actually acting in Italy. You see it's a huge area, and that's why I have mentioned they need some tailored design of good agricultural practices and tailored tools for carbon measurement, because you see that's from the southern tip of Italy all the way to turning around and getting to Slovakia, getting to Croatia. You see that. It's a cross-border, like I said, implementation, Italy and Croatia. Farmers region selective for regenerative agriculture trials. They do selecting farmers on each of those areas. This region you can see on the left of Italy, on the right of Croatia, to do what we call the farm trials and checking. Example, I'll do no tillage using this amount of this accumulation of, for example, 2 tons of carbon biomass for this type of soil. I'll be trying 2 tons of residues per hectare here, but on the other hand, on the farm on Croatia, I'll be trying 5 tons. Why are they doing this difference? Because they are doing trials to understand which responds better to climate change, to production, always balancing production with environmental benefits, okay? They testing carbon credits generation and market mechanisms to understand, as they are dealing under the Paris Agreement, chapter number 6, 6.2, 6.4, which means that they do cross-border implementation projects. They understand that when you do cross-border between countries, you have a level of uncertainty, a level of complexity higher than the normal when compared to a project that's developed in a single country. That's why they are testing carbon credits generation and market mechanisms to see how this market mechanism will work between two different nations. Okay. Still regarding the GECO 2.2, the monitoring and verification, they do monitor and measure soil and biomass. So they go each of those farms, they have defined and selected for trials, for verification, and for trying the new practices and validating new practices. They go, they collect the soil for soil carbon and biomass. So you see each of them, that's why it's a complex project. They use a geographic information system as a decision supporting tools. You're going to be noticing that all of those projects, they use a GIS technology because it's the way easy to use those space information technologies so you can understand the ground, you can understand the layers of complexity. Example, the soil layers with the vegetation layers, with the community layers, with the cultural layers, so they can understand on the broader view how to act. Because agriculture itself is not just implementing a practice itself. It's understanding the cultural thing and the people behind or within the farms, because they will be the ones that will be implementing the things. That's why you need to understand as a broader view. And GIS, even though it's special information, but can help you a lot understanding all those glimpses, all those variations on the tool, okay? As the first project I have mentioned, they do use a blockchain-based traceability of carbon credits to avoid losing carbon credits, avoiding losing information, and making sure the carbon credits are safer on a safe place that won't be invaded, that they will not lose that, okay? Back here, they use a standardized carbon calculators and reporting to do so, like a greenhouse gas, the GHG protocol. They can use that. They use Vera, they use different methodologies, which is a very standardized to keep integrity on a high stakes and high levels, okay? Still, what they do, how they do this, the stakeholders and the partnering, they use the body, the CRN based in body, okay? This is an institution as a leading partner, is a partner that's leading all of these movements across Italy and with Croatian institutions, but the CRN body, located in Bari, Italy, they are leading this. So it's a tip for you. Jump on the CRN body and check this GECO 2.2 project, get acquainted with, see the next steps. And they do a regional development agencies, like I said before. CRN is the head, is the leading partner that spreads and divides its responsibility amongst the other regional development agencies across Italy and across Croatia, because this is a very large project, so they need to divide so they can build up some capacity. And they work with the cooperatives and agriculture associations. It's very, very critical to work with them. It's very essential because those cooperatives and farmers association, farmers union, they are institutions that know the reality at the ground level. And without this knowledge, any carbon project, not just volunteer, but compliance carbon, won't develop well. That's why they wisely decided to have under their institutional arrangement cooperatives and agriculture associations, okay? And they do involve as well public institutions, both in Italy and Croatia, to make that happen. What they have as expected outcomes. First, the functioning of voluntary carbon market model. And why they say model? Because it's two different nations and many different areas. That's why they want to have a model that figures and fits wide range projects, or projects that goes beyond borders. Second, they want to have a scalable solutions for sustainable agriculture, and that's why they have chosen to do trials in different farms in different regions in 2 different countries. With those, they want to increase resilience and reduce emissions, increase resilience towards climate changing, and reduce emissions from the agriculture. And they want to have a blueprint replicable in other European regions. I think it's very wise from this side to want, to have the desire to be an inspiration. We call the blueprint replicable to other countries in European regions. Specifically those countries They can border with, those regions of the countries border with other countries. They can do a multi-country thing. I think that's a very happy to see a project like Eco2. And myself, personally, I have expectations to see them just taking off and flying high and far. We get to the third example of our VCM, the Voluntary Carbon Market project. It's a huge one, and even bigger than the first, even bigger than even the second. The third one is called Involter Future Agriculture, the Eastern European countries. And again, you see the link at the bottom of the page. Just click that, and this link will send you directly to the Vera certification page. And with that, you're going to be able to download the document called the PD, the project document, to check. It's over 300 pages of this document. You can get acquainted with the project and study a lot. But considering our presentation, the project overview it's a large multi-country regenerative agriculture initiative. You notice that regenerative agriculture is something transversal to many of the projects. And it's implemented in Bulgaria, Serbia, Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. It's a pretty long. The leading institution, remember the leading institution of the second project, the GICO 2.2, which was Bari in Italy. Here, the leading institution is a Romanian institution called Involter Consulting SRL. Okay? What the main goals, the project overview: transform cropland into a climate resilient and low emission systems. As I mentioned before, they're using a Vera accreditation VM0042. Okay? What are the main objectives of Involter Future Agriculture of Eastern European countries? Increase soil organic carbon, reduce greenhouse emissions, focusing on carbon dioxide, oxide, nitrogen oxide, and methane, CH4. Okay? Improve soil and water and fertilizer management, and the expectation over 30 times. Remember, I have mentioned some projects go 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Some go 30, some go 40 years, 100 years, depending. This has an expectation of this phase to be a 30 years result. And they're looking at having 190 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent across 11.6 million hectares. Remember the little e at the CO? Equivalent because they're not just working with CO2 decrease. They work with CO2, N2O, and CH4. That's why we use equivalent, because you make an equation and have a CO2 equivalent. Okay, across 11.6 million, one of the top in the world, top projects in the world, which results in equal around approximately 6 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. It's a huge project. It's very interesting for you to jump, click on the Vera website and link that I have shared with you on the previous page and get to know more about this project. What the justification, why Involter Future Agriculture has decided to go cross-border and work? Because after an extensive appraisal and diagnosis, they have noticed that those countries, they adopt intensive tillages, intensive plowing, and monocultures. They have a high usage of synthetic fertilizers, excessive irrigation that leads to soil degradation when sums up with synthetic fertilization and tillage. Low resilience to drought and climate extremes. It's not something. Does not surprise me. It does not surprise you as well. They have a problem with the drought and climate stresses. Just see what they've been doing, and they need to increase the food production by 70% by 2025. It's a global goal, but this Involter seems to have connected those personal and corporate goals with sustainable development goals. That's why they are moving. How the project works. The first sentence here is very important. Grouped project structure. What does that mean? Means that the Involter Future Agriculture does not work with a farm itself. They work with a group of farms. Like there are many different countries. They have a group of farms for each country, which makes easier operation, makes easier for modeling, makes easier for everything. That's why they are grouped projects, because of the size of the project and to decrease and make more viable the project. They start with the initial farm instance, okay? Example, for each of the country, they can start with 5 farms, and then the new participants just join the project over time. This is a normal on a carbon project. It's very hard for you to start with 20 farms, 100 farms, 50 farms. Why? Because any project is something new, something innovative. For farmers to trust you, they must see that what you propose is actually working. That's why projects, they start small, they become a reference for other projects, for other farmers, sorry, and then the other farmers can jump in. And that's why I put here on third bullet point, new participant join over time, because they start to believe on the neighbors, they just join the program is growing. The eligibility of this project, the Involved Future Agriculture, is based on VERA rules. So they follow VM 0042 rule, which is for agriculture and land management, all the rules within the document. And it's designed for large-scale expansion. So as you remember, many countries, they want to be a very broad project, very big project. What they propose as regenerative agriculture practices for the farmers joining the project. Reduced or optimized fertilizer use, no-till or reduced tillage. What's the meaning? What's the difference? No-till is plowing free. You cannot plow. You cannot use it, You're just gonna be keeping your soil untouched. You just do things that accumulate carbon and helps the carbon. Reduced tillage is a type of tillage that you normally use the disc to make this small cut on the soil, so you can add the seed on that. It's a very reduced tillage, which is positive as well. Third, cover crops and crop rotation. Fourth, residue retention. What does that mean? After, I'll give you a quick example. After the harvest of the corn, you leave a certain amount of residue in the soil that will be retained on the soil. So residue retention means that you leave the residue of a straw, for example, the straw of the corn or the maize will be on the soil, and you will not be putting the animals to graze that or to eat the residues. You're going to be keeping the residue, so for retention, for soil protection, for eolic and hydrological erosion avoidance. You're going to be keeping that to keep moisture, to keep soil structure, and so on, okay? The fifth bullet point, improved irrigation and water management, not just irrigate, but when irrigate and how irrigate, which reflects directly on the water management. Organic amendments. In this project, in some of the areas, they actually will be training farmers to produce their own organic amendments based on the resources they have within the farm. In each of the farms, they produce their own fertilizers, okay? And the last bullet, the last regenerative agriculture practice proposes improved grazing when applicable, in brackets, because not all the farms they have a livestock. It's applicable on the farms that have livestock, okay? Improved grazing, just jumping from continuous grazing to rotational grazing, which actually takes in consideration the carrying capacity of the soil, the carrying capacity of the pasture, and the capacity of animals to graze, okay? What they do, the baseline versus project scenario, what they have nowadays, they had in the last few years as a baseline, intensive tillage, a lot of plowing, high fertilizer use, monocultures, irrigation, low soil cover. What they're looking at having as a project scenario from the day one towards the 30 years of the project. Remember, those practices are processes. You don't get to do in one night, one day, 1 year. It's a process that takes years. Increase soil organic carbon, reduce N2O and CH4 emissions, lower fossil fuel use, and reduce the annual use of fuel, when compared to the baseline, and reduce everything, from emissions, from fertilizer usage and pesticide uses, okay? About the geographic scope and co-benefits of Involved Future Agriculture. Fertile, now those countries, some of those countries, they are very blessed regarding the soils. They have the fertile channels and soil and loessl soils, which are two categories of soil that have a high fertility. They are temperate continental climate, so slightly different than the other countries I have shown you over this presentation. Those countries, they are very high agricultural dependent. So meaning that any of the VC, the voluntary carbon market, or the regenerative projects that are implemented in those countries will be very positive for the country economy and stability because they are high agricultural dependent. And those countries are very vulnerable to drought and heat. And the land, cropland, there is no wetland or wetland recently converted. Okay? This project aims to benefit as a co-benefit across 8 different sustainable development goals, such as fighting hunger, decrease the carbon emission, working getting together for delivering results over border, and so on. So 8 different sustainable development goals you can see on written materials. Very interesting. This project is broad on the co-benefit, is broad on territory, and it's very important on helping those countries that are dependent on agriculture to be more reliable, be more resilient. I think this project is amazing. And other projects I supported, but this one as well, I'm very up hands for them. Regarding the monitoring, safeguards, and expected results, the monitoring is totally aligned with the VERA ALM, Agriculture Land Management methodology, which is called the VM0042. They seek and they go after field data by collecting soil, collecting information on the ground level, by using satellite verification, by doing soil sampling, like I said. They do satellite verification, checking the images back 7 years ago, back 10 years ago, back 3 years ago, comparing to today, compared to the future, so they can monitor using satellite verification, which is very interesting. This project aims and going to be using an independent verification body, okay, always independent, because they are following up very strict rules and procedures. Must be a verification body from unbiased, from outside of the chain of production or network. They do expect 166 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent on the first year, like I mentioned. There is no harm, safeguards, or legal compliance. This project, when a farm or when a country get into this, there is no problem with them. They won't have any problem with other projects. They are part. They don't have any legal problem with the compliance, because projects, they must be very transparent on that. So a farmer, when joining the program, he must have its own independence to walk in and out, so avoiding legal compliance and any problem. And the main goal, expected result, is protect soil, water, and biodiversity. Imagine a project in so many different countries, how positive it can be, on biodiversity, on carbon emission, not just the carbon emission. Remember, I mentioned many times that a good carbon project is not just about carbon. It's about biodiversity, it's about water, it's about cultural things, about communities. And really want to see this project having success over the period of 30 years. And I really want this project to be farther than that. Just getting to this other part of the presentation regarding the smallholder farmers, the role of the smallholder farmers, the scenario regarding the smallholder farmers in the voluntary carbon markets. For you to understand, more than 85% of all the farmers in the world, they have less than 20 hectares in area, meaning that they are more than 85%, they are smallholders, family farmers, smallholder farmers. That's why they play a pivotal role on those projects. They play a strategic role in voluntary carbon markets because they can contribute with a carbon sequestration, ecosystem restoration, and I tell you why ecosystem restoration, because the majority of the areas of untouched areas, preserved areas, are actually managed by smallholder farmers. Start to think beyond Europe. Start to think about Latin America and Africa and Southeast Asia. These guys, smallholder farmers, they are the ones that manage the areas. They are stewards, they look after. And that's why they are so essential for ecosystem restoration. Okay? Back here, climate resilient through agroforestry. They can be a climate resilient. How? By promoting agroforestry, conservation, and regenerative land management. So forgetting about smallholders on the VCM is just losing the thread. We cannot do that. We must incorporate and embrace them on the projects. They are so important and essential. Still regarding benefits for farms, the voluntary carbon market can become a monetary benefit because carbon payments, they help farmers with a new income, which will become diverse as a source of a diversified income. You know, remember I have mentioned twice, or maybe more than twice, that regenerative agriculture practices, they help farmers to be more sustainable, to produce more with less, and at the same time, they can help farmers qualifying to the carbon markets and creating carbon credits. So the diversified income comes not just because of the carbon credits, but comes with more margins of production, more margins of profit as well, okay? These are the monetary benefits. Regarding the non-monetary, which will reflect on monetary, better soil health, better water retention, natural pest control, more resilience as a consequence, and access to training and technical support. Not even one of the projects I have seen and I have came across in my professional life has not provided farmers with a technical assistance, technical support. And that's why it's a non-monetary, but will reflect on sustainability as a whole and monetary funds on the long term, okay? Challenges faced by smallholder farmers. These are very common in any part of the world. High upfront costs for you to start to kick off a project of voluntary carbon market. You need to cope with some upfront costs, like paying the visit of technicians, paying for the collection of the soil, paying for the analysis of the soil that has been collected, paying for the monitoring, etc. And sometimes the payment can delay up to 3 to 6 years. I've seen projects waiting 6 years to receive, but I have seen projects receiving in 18 to 20 months, okay? But I've seen projects taking longer, like I said, 6 years. And for farmers, specifically a smallholder farmer, to wait 6 years sometimes is unreal, okay? Some farmers, specifically the smallholder, they tend to have some limited clarity on pricing, how the price of the carbon credit is formed, who defines the price, and that may jeopardize the project. The fourth bullet point is the complex administrative burdens. This is a very important because for smallholder farmer as himself or herself, or maybe as a group, they must deal with administrative processes that can become administrative burdens. And something become a burden when you are not acquainted with it or you're not able to deal with it. What does that mean? Imagine you drafting a monitoring plan, drafting a monitoring following up, writing down a report, guarantee that the practices are implemented accurately on the right month with the right resources. All of these demand some capacity of management, some capacity of administration. That can become a burden if, specifically if smallholder farmer groups, they don't have the right advice. And the last challenges, one of the last challenges of this slide is tenure and security hinder participation. Land tenure, and I give an advice, read about land tenure for family farmers. Still, the right to use the land tenure insecurity is one of the main problems because many of the carbon projects, they ask the farm to have the right documents of the land so they can participate, or maybe they can claim for the carbon credits. I just give you a quick example. In Brazil, around 40% of the smallholder farmers, they have the right to use the land. They don't have the documents that secure the tenure of the land, meaning that 40% is nothing. It's less than half of those guys that manage the land. So this is something that can hinder participation on the projects, okay? Keep that in mind. I advise you to read about tenure and security, focus on smallholder farmer. That will help you a lot understanding the scenario of a smallholder farmer in the world, okay? Regarding the empowerment and value chain upgrading, still regarding some of the bottlenecks that can become some benefits, smallholders must gain bargaining power, the capacity of bargaining, the capacity of dealing, governance participation, so they must be heard, they must be part of the process in carbon projects, saying, look, I wanted this, and my limitations are those, and my goals are these. It's not a goal of the carbon developer, it's a goal of the farmers. Access to premium markets and co-benefit certifications to capture fair value. What does that mean? Mean that everything the farmer does must be recognized, okay? The society must recognize it. And then once we are able to do so, we're gonna be upgrading the value chain and empower farmers, okay? That's very pivotal. Recommendations for inclusion of smallholder farmers, improve transparency, make sure you as a carbon, I'm looking at you and understand you're gonna be a carbon developer or consultant. Ensure you will be at the forefront of this. An advice that I give to you, a recommendation, and improve the transparency or make transparency the projects. Who are you? What is the project? And what are the goals? Make it transparent. Don't lie to people saying, look, you're going to be getting 10 credits per hectare. No, make it real, make it transparent. Fair revenue sharing, keep clear that the carbon credits that will be generating are those, and the amount of those for you will be that amount, and for me that, because I'm developing, make the revenue sharing clear and fair, okay? Guarantee a simple monitoring, verification, and reporting process using the right tool, the right language, so farmers can participate. Make cooperatives stronger, so people operating under cooperation, under cooperatives, they tend to be more participatory, more participative, which makes things easier. Clear land and carbon rights, participatory design, and long-term technical assistance. Guarantee that the carbon rights are kept when you're developing the program. Make sure that the population, the farmers involved, will benefit with the carbon rights, will benefit with the participatory design, and they will have a long-term technical assistance to make sure the improve is kept, the permanence is kept, the additionality is kept. Okay? These are some of the references I am sharing with you regarding what I haven't mentioned here. They are pretty much updated. And I want to give to you one very last message here. First of all, I want to thank you to be part of this training. Okay, we have finished the module of this training. I hope you have understood me. Sorry if I spoke too quickly, but I really hope you have understood my language myself, not just the language itself, but the way I approach the thing. Make sure you have my contact on the written material. I normally put my email, my contact you can access, and if you have any question, I'll be more than happy to clarify. And I want to have a clear message to you now. You are a student, and I appreciate having had the opportunity to share with you some of my knowledge as a researcher and as a practitioner. For you to know, I'm a postdoctoral researcher at one of the main universities in Brazil, and I dive deeper into communication for voluntary carbon markets. And my goal is, during my research and my work, is to make it more assertive, the communication regarding what is sustainable livestock production, what is sustainable crop production. To make this information viable to technicians such as you, to decision makers such as the politicians, to the daily life people, to households and etc. And when I have the opportunity when I come across training like those, it makes me very happy because I have the right to share with you some of the things I have learned over my 18 years of career. And I want to give you another message to you and make sure you understand that, is that if you are looking at working on the carbon market, keep in mind that this amazing typology of sustainability, typology of a market, sustainable market, is something that's just growing. It's growing steadily, it's growing strong. We have some variations on the carbon prices, the carbon credit prices, but it's a fact. I am based in Brazil, operating in Latin America, mostly. I have operated in other continents, but operate in Latin America mainly. And I'm noticing international companies coming to Latin America and spreading the tentacles, spreading the branches here to work hard with regenerative agriculture by implementing voluntary carbon market projects that are qualified for the VCM. And I tell you, this is a very prolific area, very important area, and it's growing a lot. And the message again is be optimistic, be ready to read a lot, to understand, read the material that I have written, that My Farm has put together for you, always aiming for your good formation, for having good professionals on the market, but never give up. Don't give up on that. Things are hard, specifically when you're starting. But once you get the rhythm, it just goes. And carbon markets are something very strong, will be stronger. And the very final thing I want to tell you, keep in mind that the carbon tunnel is just a very tiny grain of sand on this amazing desert. You know, if you consider a bit better than this desert. Because when you implement a good regenerative agriculture project that's connected to voluntary carbon markets, be sure that a well done, well designed, well diagnosed, well appraised, well drafted, well monitored, well implemented project will benefit the biodiversity of the soil, the biodiversity of the forest, the communities involved. The communities will notice the improvement on their standard of life. This is a good project. The yields not necessarily will increase, but the cost of production will decrease. You have the farmer, even a smallholder, has more margins of a profit. Okay? And at the end of the day, you have the carbon credit. A good carbon project that generates a VCU, a verified carbon unit, a carbon ton, a carbon credit, surely has a sustainable agriculture behind it. And a sustainable agriculture is always backed by good professionals. Okay? Be a good professional, read, and keep in mind that I am cheering for you, and I'm cheering to your community, I'm cheering to your project developers, and don't hesitate in contacting me. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. And once again, thank you. Have a nice day. Have a nice time.